Um, I truly believe that a year ago, when I committed to do this, I don't think anybody gave me much of a chance to win. I think it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that 32 years in Washington was not enough for Dick Durbin. He could get 6 more. And I think that was probably still true 6 months ago. But then things started to get a little bit interesting, as you're probably well aware. The Chicago Sun-Times came out with a poll, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago that showed us within 7 points. Our own poll released the next day showed it within 6 points. And there have been widely varying polls since then, one of which by the Tribune did not survey likely voters, but rather all voters, and I think was really not statistically very meaningful. There's no question that I've got an uphill fight. I'm the underdog. I'm the David, he's the Goliath. But as we have seen in wave years, which there's every possibility this could be, some very surprising things could happen. And I will say, I mentioned I was in Washington yesterday. For the first time, to my knowledge, our National Republican Senatorial Committee was starting to talk about Illinois. In giving a little speech that I heard the executive director deliver, he talked about the fact that they thought they had a good chance to pick up the Senate by winning, I forget, 6 seats or 7 seats, and he kind of ticked those up. And he said, and interestingly, some new ones that are coming onto our radar, namely, if I remember right, it was Illinois, Virginia, and Oregon, maybe? I think that's what he said. But as we said earlier, my opponent has much more money than I do, which will make it difficult. But I'll guarantee you we have a lot more volunteers than he does.
I thought we could start talking about ISIS. I'm interested in your thoughts on what's happening with the airstrikes coalition.
I would probably be critical of the path that we took to get here. I think it was a serious mistake to pull all of our troops out of Iraq. Had we not done that, we might not be here. Having said that, we are here, and I am generally supportive of some of the actions taken by the president. I think ISIS represents a very, very serious threat, and I think we need to take some action, which we're doing some things. Probably the one thing I disagree with the president on is I think it's a huge mistake to tell your opponent that you're not going to have boots on the ground, even though I think it's true that Americans are not ready to send troops back in. At some point they may be, and I believe that some of our generals are saying that that's going to be necessary, and perhaps we are hoping that Iraqi troops will be able to do it, or Saudi Arabian troops will be able to do it, or somebody else will be able to do it, but somebody's probably going to have to do it, or it's not going to happen.
How long do you think, I mean, just in your estimation, or I realize you're not in Congress, but how long do you see us being involved in police? Is this something that you think is going to continue over the next decades? Do you want to see it stop?
Well, that depends what you mean. You said, how long will we be involved in the Middle East? I mean,
in these conflicts.
There's no way to predict it, but it's very likely to be many, many years, yes.
You're in the state Senate now. Obamacare continues to rattle around, and I know it's part of your campaign. It's part of what the state does. Bruce Rauner, I guess, now says he would not have had our state sign up for it. Pat Quinn says we've got like 450,000 people who would not have insurance if not for that. Where are you on that? Did the state do the right thing, and what's your view on the federal side of health care at this point?
Well, Bernie, a lot of the new sign-ups or signees or whatever you correctly would call them signed onto Medicaid, and the Democrats in the Illinois Senate were selling the idea of putting more people on Medicaid that it would cost the state nothing. The argument was the federal government is going to pay everything for the first 3 years, I believe, and then
through 2016 maybe.
Whatever, and then I don't know, 90% after that or something like that. But the fact of the matter was that only applied to those who previously were not eligible for Medicaid. As it has turned out, there were a significant number of people who were eligible for Medicaid but not enrolled in Medicaid, who have now become enrolled in Medicaid, and in those circumstances, the federal government only pays 50% of the cost. So Illinois is going to have some, is already experiencing some increase in those costs as a result of that. I fundamentally think that the direction that we went with Obamacare was a mistake. I believe that when you have such huge life-impacting program, that it should be done on a bipartisan basis, and clearly it was not done on a bipartisan basis. I believe that we need to go back to the drawing board. I believe that we can keep some of the good parts of Obamacare, such as keeping young adults on their parents' policies until age 26, finding a way to get past pre-existing conditions, yes, and some other things that need to be done, obviously, to make sure that we can buy any health care policy available across state lines. I mean, precluding people from buying a policy across state lines, to me, was fundamentally ridiculous. Should never have been the case. I believe that we should we could reduce medical costs in the country by allowing the reimportation of American-made drugs.
Just like Blagojevich wanted.
Possibly so.
Yeah.
Look, as goofy as Blagojevich was, he did a couple of good things, including the iPass. I think it was a very positive thing that he got accomplished. He was just kind of a crook in the way he did it. How many people had to pay how much to Blagojevich in order to get the iPass? I don't know. I'm just kidding.
If you say that we should go back to the drawing board on health care, but with these other things, what happens to all the people that signed up? I mean, are you saying repeal Obamacare, and then what happens to the people who have signed up all across Illinois and the country?
Well, first of all, I'm going to go to Washington with a set of principles, the same as I came to Springfield. I didn't come down saying, my way or the highway, this is it. I'm going to do the same thing when I go to Washington. I think you've seen me. I think you've been aware of the fact that I've worked with Democrats. Was it you that coined the term about Marty Sandoval and I as the odd couple?
I did not.
Okay, somebody did. But I don't think Republicans have a monopoly on good ideas, and I don't think Democrats have a monopoly on good ideas. I think we get some of the best legislation when we listen to each other and work together to solve those problems. Off the top of my head, one thought would be take the repeal of Obamacare and a replacement for Obamacare in one package together, so that that's the transition, if you will.
Continuity.
Yes.
What are some of the areas of Obamacare that you feel do need to be changed?
Well, the whole fundamental idea that government knows best, that government says, here's 4 choices, these are your plans, you got to take it, period, that's it. I believe that the free market will offer lots of alternatives. What the deductible should be, that should be up to me and the insurance company. What insurance I need, what I need coverage should be up to me and the insurance company, not having a government dictate that says this is it, period. The other thing I forgot when we were talking about healthcare cost saving, I'll just throw into it. This is an old issue you remember from prior campaigns. Tort reform. That's kind of gotten a little bit off of the main page, but it's still, I think, necessary and important to help control our health care costs.
I don't know if it's fair or not to ask, but it's part of who you are with the stores and the businesses that you have. But do you offer your employees health care, and in what form? And have the mandates caused you trouble or caused your employees good or bad, or where is that, and how many are there?
We have always offered our employees a good health care plan. I think it's Blue Cross Blue Shield at Oberweis Asset Management when I started and ran it, and I believe, as far as I know, still today, I'm sure, and at Oberweis Dairy as well. I'm not running either company today. I don't know the exact details of those plans at this point, but I do know they both have very good plans available to employees, and employees pay a part of the cost, and I don't know how much.
I also know it's been part of the back and forth between you and Senator Durbin, but on minimum wage, and he talks about your stores and whatever. Your view on the minimum wage, and with your experience as a businessman, you know, the president and the Durbins of the world are going for 10-10 federal minimum wage. Your thoughts on that? And I know you probably said it other places, but what and why?
Look, Mr. Durbin will do everything he can to keep the focus off the failure of his policies. I mean, this guy is just an absolute walking job killer. So he'd like to talk about anything he can to keep the focus off of that. And I hope you all will pay some attention to that and realize that the key issue here is who understands the economy, who understands what it'll take to get the economy growing faster to create more jobs. I think I win. But I think you're aware, Bernie, that I filed, well, let me back up. When you talk about national minimum wage, as I think you're well aware, the CBO looked at that and determined that if that became the national policy, it would mean that approximately 900,000 people would be moved from below the poverty line to above the poverty line. That's good. But at the same time, it would kill approximately 500,000 jobs. So if you're one of those 900,000 that gets a bonus, great. If you're one of the 500,000 that loses a job, it's not so good. And who would those 500,000 tend to be? Well, they would tend to be teenagers, particularly minority teenagers, certainly younger workers with less job experience. As you know, I proposed a bill that would have done essentially the same thing, raise the minimum wage to $10 over 3 years for Illinois, but done it in a way that it wouldn't be a big job killer. It would have allowed companies discretion for younger entry workers who had not had a job before, and it would say that those who had to begin paying for their own health care at age 26 would be entitled to a minimum wage of $10.
Okay.
$9.50, $10
And
over 3
below
years.
that, it would stay where it is?
Yes.
And you were pretty wrongly criticized by your opponent for this because he said it's not all teenagers and whatever, or, you know, that you're, and then a lot of people are, you know, are supporting families or whatever, helping with their families.
Well, look, first of all, people can't support families on minimum wage jobs. That's not what they're about. They're about learning. They're about starting. They're about getting involved, finding those entry-level jobs so that you can get the skills to move on to other jobs. That's why I think my suggestion made some sense. Now, and I picked 26 because it was an age where people had to begin paying for their own health care, and some of those people may be supporting families, but typically nobody's going to do it. It's not going to happen on a minimum wage job. I proposed a bill, and I would thought that we would then have some discussion on it, and maybe 26 is not the right age. Maybe it should be 23. Maybe it should be 21. Maybe it should be, you know, whatever. Maybe it shouldn't be $10. Maybe it should be X. But the Democrats in the Illinois legislature wouldn't even allow a discussion on that bill. You may or may not be aware of this, but towards the end of the session, I don't remember the exact days, but let's say it's Wednesday and we're ending session, they declared that they would have a hearing on this bill in Chicago on Thursday.
The day after the session? Day
after the session, assuming that as a guy running for the U.S. Senate, there's no way that I would be able to make that minute because I would have commitments going on. We canceled everything, said, I will be there because this is important. As soon as I told them that, they canceled that session in Chicago. I think this was a perfect example of politics at its worst.
Yeah, but do you think they would have passed the bill anyway?
No.
Okay.
No, but I think they decided they didn't even want a discussion on the bill.
Okay.
I'm wondering how you would rate the performance of Congress these days. What's going right in Congress? What's not working so well? What do you see as the problems with the vote?
Well, look, my role model or my ideal, if you send me to Washington, would be to work with the other side as, let's say, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did. I mean, those two guys couldn't have been further apart in their philosophy, if you will, and yet they worked together to accomplish some pretty good things. I'm a little reluctant to say this publicly, but I will. I think Bill Clinton did some fairly good things. I think John F. Kennedy did some pretty good things, frequently working with the other side to accomplish those things. The things that I was able to do in Springfield, like getting the interstate speed limit increased to 70, was done by working with Marty Sandoval and Napoleon Harris and other Democrats, and trying to explain why I thought it made good logical sense that it wasn't a Republican bill, it wasn't a Jim Oberweis bill, it was a common sense thing that would help to bring Illinois into the 21st century and align us with other states, and that made a lot of sense. And we were able to convince an overwhelming majority. And by the way, when we came back last, Pat Quinn, of course, didn't like that bill, but he had no choice, he thought, a year ago, to sign the bill. But as he did it, or after he did it, he instructed the Illinois Tollway Authority and IDOT that they would interpret the bill to exclude
Urban areas.
Yes, even though I'm told by our staff, at least, that specifically roadways with limited access, like tollways or interstates, are by definition excluded from being a part of the urban areas. Therefore, the bill applied to everything. Obviously, Mr. Quinn had more authority with the Tollway Authority and IDOT than I did, so they followed his rule. So we then came back to the state legislature and clarified that, said absolutely they're excluded. This applies to all tollways in the state of Illinois, unless there's a safety question. You can do a study, and if a safety study shows it shouldn't apply, it won't apply. That bill passed the Senate 48-6, and then passed the House 111-4. And who was the guy that said, "Let the will of the people be the law of the land"? I think you all know who that is. But since he didn't like it, he vetoed it. So he did prevent the will of the people from being the law of the land.
Interesting.
So far, but we're going to get another shot at him in November, but I suspect politics had something to do with that, too.
Interesting. You said earlier that Dick Durbin is I think a walking job killer or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. What is it about his policy? Name what he's done that you think hurts.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. The incredible overbearing regulations that government has put on, the uncompetitive tax rates that he's helped to create over the last 32 years. Just since the last time he ran for election, the average income of an Illinois family has declined by $5,053. These policies clearly aren't working. We need to have a simplified tax code that would let us understand what happens when we earn more or less money, would save incredible costs of figuring taxes. We need to simplify it for corporations. Mr. Durbin likes to say that, our tax rate might be the highest of any country in the industrialized world, but nobody pays that rate. They pay 8% or they pay 10% or whatever the case may be. Which makes my point. Why not have a level playing field for all? Get rid of the special interest. Get rid of the deductions. Get rid of the things that the lobbyists are able to put into place to create special treatment for individual companies. Have a flat rate that's competitive with the rest of the world. And same thing for individuals.
Yeah, what is the corporate rate and what should it be?
I believe it's 35% plus, is it another 4.6% for Obamacare or something like that? 39.6%. I think that to be competitive with the rest of the world, it needs to be in the 20 to 25% range. One, again, this is not a here's my deal, but I think Camp has a proposal out there to simplify it to 2 tax brackets, 10, 0, 10, or 25. If we made corporate rate 25 so that it fit in with the highest rate, it could simplify things. As a part of that, we might even have an opportunity to get rid of special breaks like the so-called carry interest. If that top rate is low enough, but again, negotiation, trying to work together to solve things, but maybe you could simplify things by getting rid of capital gains and just having everything taxed at 10% or 25%, period.
Do you think your candidate for governor would like that?
He might.
Okay. By the way, you also talk about overbearing regulations. Name 1 or 2.
Oh,
I'm
goody,
here for you,
goody.
obviously.
Can I start with my favorite?
Please do.
Let me explain a little bit about the milk pricing system we have in this country. Back in the 1930s, there was perceived to be a shortage of milk in southern states like Florida. Not as much milk was produced there, and an excess supply in states like Wisconsin. So our federal government, in its great wisdom and knowledge, set up a convoluted pricing system that made the price of milk higher the further you got from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, believing that higher prices would drive the milk from Wisconsin to Florida. The whole thing was very convoluted and questionable to begin with, but regardless of whether there's any logic for that in the 30s or 40s, today you can load a tanker of milk in Wisconsin, a refrigerated tanker, and drive it to Florida overnight, so there is no rationale for that pricing structure. Secondly, the federal government further determined that they would like to subsidize the production of cheese and penalize the production of milk in a glass bottle. Their convoluted reasoning was that the demand for fluid milk was fixed and people would buy fluid milk for themselves or their kids regardless of the price. However, cheese, something good for everybody in the federal government's determination, demand was much more price sensitive, so that if we subsidize cheese and penalize fluid milk, people will still drink the same amount of milk, but now they'll eat more cheese because it's cheaper. So they set up this whole government regulatory structure, which now has processors like ourselves dividing milk into Category 1, which is fluid milk that goes into a bottle or carton or whatever for sales as fresh milk. Category 2, which are special manufactured products such as ice cream. I know this is more information than any of you ever wanted to hear. Category 3, which is effectively cheese. And Category 4, which is other products like butter or skim milk powder or things of that nature. And the price that a processor pays for the milk is dependent on which one of those categories that milk ultimately goes into, to the degree that we've created a whole new regulatory burden to audit and control how much milk we use in each of those categories, keep those regulations, and then the federal government sends in their milk market administrator. In our case, we're a little guy, so they only come in, I think, once a month to audit those numbers. In bigger companies like a Dean Foods, for instance, they literally have 2 government employees stationed permanently at Dean Foods to monitor day-to-day how that milk is used. And I will argue there is absolutely no benefit whatsoever to consumers in any fashion in this whole program, yet it costs billions of dollars to administer, of taxpayer dollars, plus billions and billions more from the private sector, driving up the price of cost of milk.
Isn't this the kind of program, however, like the farmers generally love, the farm bill, and well, we've got farm stuff, we've got ethanol. Are you saying subsidies and or supports for all of that should just go? Because wouldn't your constituents in rural Illinois be upset with you?
I'm saying this is a clear example of a regulatory burden imposed by the federal government, which may or may not have ever made sense, that clearly does not make sense today, but you can't get rid of it. Because once these programs get in, you get a core constituency who don't want to give it up. This is so extreme and so crazy that finally, after years and years and years of negotiation and arguments, the dairy, what do you call it? It's IDFA, International Dairy Foods Dairy
Lobby.
Association, not
Whatever.
whatever. Okay,
Might
the
be
association, has finally convinced all of its, at least the majority of its members, through a vote, and those members include the farmers who process the milk, cheese companies that their primary business is manufacturing cheese, and fluid processors like ourselves, that this is stupid. This is ridiculous, and we'd like to get rid of it. And still, even with industry support, not even close to getting rid of it.
So that's a good example of kind of the entrenched thing, because frankly, since the 40s, there have been a number of Republican administrations, right,
Yeah,
that have dodged that as well,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is nothing new.
No, it's certainly not. That's the problem. Once these things get in and you get constituencies for them, it is harder than heck to get rid of them.
So what's a new one kind of in the last 4 or 6 years during Obama's term that you're concerned about is going to take on a kind of a life of its own?
Oh, we got a great one. Let me just see if I can find the notes on it. And again, I guess it relates to farm, what they call it the clean.
It's not the waterways.
No. Actually, I think the EPA has done some good in cleaning up our waterways over a period of time.
Thanks.
Climate hubs, that's what they're called. The administration has recently announced establishing regional climate hubs to inform farmers about climate change at an initial cost of approximately $120 million.
You think the climate change thing is a hoax or what?
I don't know. I'm willing to listen to that. There obviously are opinions on both sides. To the degree that it's right, obviously we need to do whatever we can to help protect future generations. I don't think it's. I'm not 100% convinced that it is. I think there's still some question about it, but I'm willing to listen.
And coal is a big industry around here and has been, and Future Gen is getting, I think, significant federal funding to pump carbon dioxide into the ground. Are you in favor of that? And what about coal policy in general?
I'm an all-of-the-above energy guy. I believe that again, with reasonable concerns for our overall environment, I believe that the federal government should not be picking the winners and losers for energy. If wind energy makes economic sense, great. But now I just heard on the radio yesterday they're saying that they found a new problem with that anybody within, I forget living how close to these wind turbines now, that they're finding that it's impacting their hearing and all. I mean, a whole new set of problems. If solar energy is economically competitive, that certainly makes sense. And in some areas of the country, I believe that it probably is. I think it is very reasonable to approve the Keystone Pipeline to transport oil and gas from areas of this country where it's being produced, and to allow the export of liquefied natural gas, which would give us more, how do I say it, more influence, more ability to help our friends, to allow them to be less dependent on Russia, where they're perhaps receiving gas currently. I think the whole idea of the new horizontal drilling techniques will continue to allow the United States to increase its own oil production, and we've got a lot of that right here in Illinois as well, that if the government would get out of the way, would allow a significant increase in production and drive down our energy costs in this country. We have a chance to become a significantly increased manufacturing powerhouse again in this country. because we have some energy advantages over most of our competitors in terms of energy costs, and that's a big plus many times in manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, the coal community is worried that regulations are going to basically end any new coal plants. Do you have any thoughts on if the EPA is correct in the steps it has taken?
My reaction is that we have gone way too far in that. I believe that again, it seems a little bit crazy that we're going to produce coal in Illinois and ship it all to China, where they're going to burn it, and it's going to have the same impact as if it were done here. Here we are burning coal, but it's being brought in from, I think, Wyoming, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we're burning some local coal here too, like in our power plant, if you have adequate scrubbers and technology. You know,
Okay.
Elkhart supplies CWLP here in Springfield.
Okay.
Kind of related to that, one of the issues that strikes me that's particularly relevant to Springfield, the rail relocation. Not so much that, but the fact that increasingly oil tanker cars coming from north.
Thank you. You're making my point about the Keystone Pipeline,
Yeah, carrying much more volatile fuel.
Yes. Yeah.
So the issue gets to be, what's the role of the federal government, I guess, relative to safety of citizens along the 10th Street corridor when
Look, when safety is an issue, that I think is a legitimate role of the federal government. There are ways to make tankers safer, and I think we're starting to move in that direction, and that I could support. But again, the simplest answer is let's approve the pipeline. That's a much more efficient way to move oil than through tankers. Once you've got that established and open, it's less expensive and it's safer.
You mentioned horizontal drilling also. You're talking about fracking, of course.
That's related, yes.
Okay. I was wondering, being in the state legislature, what are your thoughts on how the state has been handling the guidelines for that? It's not
I was-
going so well.
I was one of the sponsors of the fracking bill. I think that it's good for our state. I think it's good for our country. And I think that our bill had a great deal of protections built into it. I think that we have some in the administration who don't like it, who are fighting it, and they're fighting it through refusing to issue reasonable regulation.
One of the issues Senator Durbin talks about a lot, he had an event out at Lincoln Community College, is for-profit colleges and how much they get in federal loan money and how much the default, like it's 40% of all the defaults or something are for-profit colleges. Corinthian is one that, do you have any thoughts?
Corinthian is one he essentially put out of business.
Is that a bad thing?
That's a bad thing, yes.
Okay, so give your views of this whole issue.
I think the critical force here should be to get the economy moving forward fast enough so that when people graduate from college, they have the ability to repay those loans. To the degree that the federal government gets involved and starts handing out money to everybody, yes, you get abuses like that. And that's one of the problems with having the government involved in those types of things. I think that private colleges clearly play a legitimate role in helping to educate students. I believe that in many cases they may be more oriented towards what the workforce is looking for in terms of skill set once have graduated. Let me just digress slightly on the subject, if I may. As you probably know, I've spent quite a bit of time on the south side of Chicago in the African American community listening to problems and trying to understand their needs. There are three issues that keep coming back over and over. Jobs, and that's not just the African community. Better education for their kids, because that leads to better jobs. And thirdly, reducing the violence in Chicago. As I listened to that, we thought a lot about how do you get a better education for kids? Well, I will say clearly competing schools tends to produce better educational result. Competition tends to make us all better. If somehow could wave a magic wand, or in Illinois, I guess, use political power to get a monopoly for ice cream sales so that only Oberweis Dairy could sell ice cream in Illinois, it'd be wonderful. I'd do great. We'd make a lot of money. But over a period of time, probably our product wouldn't be as good. Probably our customer service would decline. And probably our price would go up because we have a monopoly. It is competition that makes us work hard at having the best ice cream we can possibly make, at having the best customer service we can provide, and at having price that's competitive with the marketplace. The exact same principles apply to education. It is, I believe, absolutely true that if you have schools competing with each other, you'll get a better educational product from all of those schools. And if you don't, the school that doesn't provide a better educational product will eventually die, go out of business. In Washington, D.C., and be replaced by another one, by the way. In Washington, D.C., there was a pilot program, incentive scholarship program, I forget what the name was, but it was basically a program where the money followed the students. So if the student went to school A, the money went to school A. If the student went to school B, the money went to school B. And if the student went to school C, the money went to school C. Well, guess what? The schools want the money. So what do? They try to get better and better to compete for those dollars. Who's the beneficiary of that? The kids, because they get a better education. And what kids are benefiting in Washington, D.C.? Especially minority students, poor students that don't have any other choices. They can't send their kids to a private school. Dick Durbin killed that program, in significant part, in my opinion, because he's controlled by the NEA union bosses who don't like competition. They like monopolies. They like being in control and not having to compete with others. That is a perfect example, in my opinion, of what's wrong with a career politician, a job-killing career politician like Dick Durbin. In Time magazine, I happened to read an article 6 or so months ago about a school on the south side of Chicago, 76th in Kedzie, essentially, in a minority or challenged community, by the name of Sarah E. Good. They're in their 3rd year right now. And after I read that article, I thought, this is great. I'm going to go visit the school. And I did. And I got a tour, talked to some of the people. And here's the premise. New high school, they're in their 3rd year. After your 4 years of high school, you can stay for an additional 2 years. And if you do, you get an associate's degree. IBM provided some additional funding for this school and some input into the coursework for the school. And the promise is, if you stay for that extra 2 years, you get your associate degree. Along with that comes a guaranteed job with IBM starting at $40,000 a year. Now, you're not going to get rich at $40,000 a year, but guess what? If you're a poor minority kid on the south side of Chicago who's worried about ever getting a job, here is a ticket to the middle class. Once you've worked for IBM for a few years, that's a pretty good resume thing if you want to go work for someplace else. Or if you want to stay with IBM, that's a pretty good opportunity.
This voucher program, and I'm not particularly familiar with it, but are you saying that government money, whatever tax money, should go also to parochial schools? Because I know that's been an issue for many years. You know, religious schools?
I have no problem with that.
And also in the student loan thing, I believe the federal government took over the college loan program and took it away from banks. Was that a mistake? Should it go back to banks? You think the private sector was better at it?
Yes.
You mentioned that violence in Chicago is a concern we've heard a lot about from families. What could the federal government do to get involved in that problem and self-address it?
I'm not sure that is really a federal government issue. I will tell you that as I've talked to people in the community, it's their belief that if the kids had, and understand among adults in that community, unemployment rates are extraordinarily high, and I don't quote me on this, but 40 or 50%. Among teenage kids, it's like 70 or 80%. It's incredible. That is a major, major challenge. How do they get jobs? Well, you got to get a better education. So it starts better education, then hopefully a better job. If they've got a job, they're less likely to be involved in gangs. They're less likely to be involved in drugs, because what happens so often is the job they get is selling drugs. Pastor Corey Brooks, who, by the way, is not from Chicago. Do you know the story? Do you know recognize that name?
The rooftop preacher.
Yes. This is a guy who grew up in Tennessee, moved to the south side of Chicago, started his church there 14 years ago, and it's at roughly 6700 South Martin Luther King Drive. There was a motel across the street from his church that was a center for prostitution and drugs. This guy, without permission, climbed up on the roof of the motel and said, "I'm staying here until people donate enough money to buy this thing and tear it down." He was on the roof for over 3 months, 94 days to be exact. December, January, and February. Not the best days to be on a roof in Chicago. Not even coming down to go to the bathroom, by the way. The good news is they did eventually succeed. They got enough money donated. They did buy the building. They've torn it down. It's a vacant lot, and he now hopes to build a community center there to provide a place for kids to come so they don't get involved in gangs, so that they don't get involved in drug sales, trying to bring in some companies that would perhaps have training centers or other things that would give kids basic skill sets to be able to go out and get jobs. This guy, I think you're going to hear more about him in the future. He's a pretty unique guy who takes no credit for himself. He's not doing it for, yeah, I did this. He's doing it because he cares about the people in the community. And he started Project Hood, where he had a program that he was calling Brothers on the Block, where he's asking 5,000 men to come out on Friday nights and stand on the 500 highest crime corners in the city of Chicago. I will tell you, I've been out 5 times on the corner of 79th and Cottage Grove with them, handing out my literature along with their Reduce the Violence literature. And the people on the corner of 79th and Cottage Grove are just as friendly or friendlier than a lot of the people in the suburbs or in Springfield, Illinois. I will admit the first night I had several people who said, "I've never seen a white Republican here before. But thank you for coming. I appreciate it, and I'm going to vote for you." I believe we might be at an historic turning point where it's okay for African Americans on the south side and west side of Chicago to say, "I like this Democrat, but I like this Republican, and I'm going to vote for the person that I think is best instead of automatically voting for the party." And guess what? If they get competition going between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party to listen to their problems, to understand their issues, and to offer our best solutions from both sides, they're going to have more voting power because they're going to have people competing for those votes. Just as competition works in the private sector, just as competition works in the educational sector, competition will work in the political sector as well.
With the situation in Chicago, the violence, can you talk some about your philosophies regarding guns, gun control issues, and the role of the government in that?
Sure. I believe in Second Amendment rights. I think we need to be very careful about putting one law after another law in place when those laws don't work. I don't know, that's really basically my philosophy.
You are not in favor of background checks for gun buyers, is that correct?
No, I support our current laws which require background checks. I think that's reasonable.
Do they cover gun shows now?
I believe they cover dealers at gun shows, but if you, Bernie, went to a gun show and you had 6 guns that you had inherited from your grandfather, you wanted to sell them, my understanding is it would not cover that sale.
And you're okay with that?
Yeah, look, the violence and the crimes that occur typically are a result of straw man purchases where your cousin wants a gun, but your cousin is not eligible to get one. You buy it for him and then give it or sell it to your cousin. That's the majority of where the problem comes. Or, major shipments in from other places that are illegal. It's generally not from legal purchases.
Is there So what would you suggest? Is there any realistic way to get at that issue? Or is this just something that is the way it is?
I'm willing to listen.
A lot of your advertising, and at least the radio stuff, I've heard a couple of different versions. It talks about the IRS. You talk about we're not going to let Dick Durbin use the IRS to go against families anymore. I know that the letter he wrote was asking them to investigate Crossroads GPS, which was raising hundreds of millions of dollars for Republican causes, and was tax exempt. So I guess I open that issue for you because you made it a big part of your campaign.
Okay, you open the door for me to pass out a few of those. If you'll take one down and pass them around. This is, I think, an incredibly serious issue. I believe that the use of the IRS to attack political opponents was very wrong when Richard Nixon attempted to do it, and it's certainly just as wrong when Dick Durbin attempts to do it. It is the use of the federal government to intimidate or to bully your political opponents. And he used the IRS in that case against, the letter was asking him to investigate certain organizations, no liberal organizations. Crossroads in particular was named. But we'd like to know
I thought the letter was just about Crossroads.
Well, you have to go back and look at it.
You know, Karl Rove is not exactly a non-political being, is he?
No, I'm sure he's not. But, you know, there are laws, there are regulations. I believe that my understanding is that for it to be a in that status, C4, more than 50% of the funds have to be spent on education as opposed to supporting any specific candidate. For Durbin to attempt to bully them and to keep people from donating to them because he doesn't like the fact that they support conservative candidates is exactly what's wrong. Now, let me tell you, at the Chicago Tribune editorial board, we have asked on numerous occasions, what additional correspondence beyond that have you had with with the IRS? He has consistently maintained none. And at the end of the editorial board, they gave each candidate one question to ask of the other. And my question was, Senator Durbin has posted all communications he had with the IRS, you have mostly refused to answer the question, but your campaign sent out a statement recently that included the following assertion. Senator Durbin has posted all communications he had with the IRS on his Senate website, and it's been there for 4 years. My question was, do you stand by your campaign's assertion that you and your office had only that one communication with the IRS during the scandal? His answer was absolutely yes. At which time we produced further communication that he had a few days after his infamous letter to the IRS.
Which is this one-liner, Jonathan, I hope you are well. FYI, Senator Durbin sent the attached commissioner today regarding the political work of C4s. We are not the first to ask, of course, all the best. So just that follow-up letter to say, did you get what we sent?
Well, there was.
That's what I saw.
I think there was a little more to it. I think there was an attachment from that. In any event, it's not that one communication that was necessarily so damning. It's the fact that we've asked for what other communications he had. He said there are none. Oh, well, here's one that was only uncovered because of the House Oversight Committee investigation. What else is there? And by the way, this all goes back to, obviously, Lois Lerner and the fact that all of the emails suddenly disappeared once the House started looking into what was going on there. Congress, in its great wisdom, has exempted itself from FOIA. So there's no way for us to force Durbin to give us any other communications that he had or may have had with the IRS. We'd like to know what other communication there was, and there's no way for us to find out. But we do know that he lied about whether there had been any additional communication.
So Crossroads is, the way I understand, a pretty good example of this. All of the donors are anonymous. What? And I mean,
they don't have to disclose.
I think that's correct. Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the thinking behind that? I mean, I understand Citizen United and all, but why don't people that donate those kind of funds stand up and be counted, you know?
I didn't pass the law. Ask Dick Durbin what the thinking is behind it.
Well, Citizens United was the Supreme Court. And,
Yeah, but no,
Oh,
the
oh,
question is,
C4.
yeah,
Right.
right.
yeah. Well, some people think C4s are being misused because, you know, a lot of them are really mostly political. They just don't name, you know, they just don't say that vote for, and everything else is fine, and it's like running political ads constantly. Both sides. Is that
Both
good, or
sides.
should that be changed?
Look, a lot of the people who serve in Congress would like to see the ability of people to voice their opinions squelched. Why? Well, if you're an incumbent, you have an incredible advantage over a challenger. And to be honest with you, until 2 years ago, I didn't understand. I knew they had an advantage, but I didn't understand how much of an advantage. My district office has a young lady, Kim Murphy, who is phenomenal. And actually, she worked for Chris Lawson before me. She helps people every day. She knows where to go, how to get it done. Constantly, she's helping people solve problems. Guess who gets credit for that? Not Kim Murphy, Jim Oberweis. Who does it? Kim Murphy. I do almost nothing in terms of solving those little day-to-day problems. She does it all. She does a fantastic job. I get credit for it. Money comes into the district for a road project, bridge project. Who gets credit for it? I get credit for it, even if I did nothing to make it happen. There's an opening of a new business in the community. I get invited and I get my picture in the newspaper because I'm those types of things going on over and over give an incumbent huge media coverage, huge advantages over anybody challenging. If you don't have something like Citizens United, the only people who could have any reasonable chance of challenging an incumbent would be people who had a lot of their own personal wealth, because we have limits on how much can be contributed. And the only way to overcome that huge incumbent advantage is through a lot of media and a lot of expense. So yes, I support allowing people to express their opinions. In the case of C4s, they are supporting ideas for the most part rather than candidates. But as you point out, you know, they're probably either supporting conservative ideas or they're supporting liberal ideas like George Soros or whatever. But isn't it fair if you have both sides?
You say Citizens United was a good decision because it lets people spend what they want.
Yes.
Okay. Immigration in various of your campaigns has been an issue. Durbin kind of came up with the DREAM Act 12 years ago or so. Where are you on that today?
I, today and always, have believed that illegal immigration is a problem. Immigration itself, I think, is good for a country. It typically brings in people with entrepreneurial spirits and initiative. Almost all of us have immigrants as ancestors. It's certainly been good for our country, but we have laws on the books, and I believe that those should be followed. If they're not good, then let's change the laws. But
Well, we have 11 million or something illegal people in America now. Should there be some path to citizenship for those people, or the young among those people who were brought here by their parents, or should there not?
I think that amnesty per se would just make the situation that much worse, and I believe, regardless of what you want to call it, the so-called Gang of Eight bill was essentially an amnesty bill with a little tax penalty. That would be a serious mistake. I do believe that if kids were brought here at a young age and they've grown up here, they've been here for whatever, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, and they've considered themselves American and going to school here, in those cases, I believe that we should provide them with a path to citizenship, because in this country we generally don't penalize kids for the mistakes of their parents. The parents, however, who broke the laws coming here, I don't believe we should give a free pass and provide amnesty. And I think above all, we better be working hard to secure our borders so that we know who is coming.
Okay, so the law says they should be deported when caught, which arguably, the advocates would say is you're breaking apart that family, or unless they're taking the kids with them. But that's what you're saying should happen? Everybody should be...
Actually, what I've suggested, Bernie, is that in those cases where the kids are here, we should allow the parents to stay because we don't want to break up the families. But the way to do it is not with amnesty and not with a path to citizenship, but rather with a non-immigrant visa, allowing them to stay here, pay taxes, work, return home, and come back here legally. But I don't believe those people who broke those laws should be entitled to or given government entitlements unless and until they become citizens, and they should have to become a citizen the same way that anybody else does. Go to the back of the line, not cut to the head of the line, and follow the same process. And I believe, by the way, that's a reasonable, middle-of-the-road position that might be a framework to which we could bring people on the right and people on the left towards to actually pass an immigration bill that's not an amnesty. Mr. Durbin, on the other hand, is at the far extreme amnesty for everybody side.
I'm sure he would say they're going to pay something, but that's fine. Or, you know,
Pay something for their amnesty. Buy their amnesty.
Go through various hoops.
Buy their amnesty, yes.
Well,
They have to learn English.
I won't argue either way. Anyway.
Senator Durbin has been on a crusade about businesses that are moving overseas to get better tax rates. You've been critical of his stance on that. You say that shows he's out of touch.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Why is that?
Sure. As I've said before, this guy is a walking job killer, and this is just one more example of where he's attempted to use the government to bully people with whom he disagrees. These are companies who are following his tax code, not my tax code, that tax code that is so incredibly ridiculously complex. Every person, every corporation has an obligation to pay taxes that they legitimately owe, but they're not required to pay something more. Now, if you follow Mr. Durbin's bullying approach to force companies to stay, and by the way, there is nobody in this world who will work harder to keep every company in Illinois and every company in the United States in the United States. But I want to do it through encouraging them to be here, by making it make sense for them to be here, by having a tax code that is competitive and the companies want to be here instead of trying to bully them into staying here. And let's go just one step further. It is probably correct that Mr. Durbin's bullying can keep some companies here through intimidation in the short run. But now let's look at the long run. Where do you think companies are going to want to start businesses? Where do you think they want to grow businesses? In an area where they want to be because it's an attractive place to do business, or in a place where they've been threatened if they move from that, they're going to pay fines and penalties and everything else? The answer is clear. Companies will grow businesses in areas where they believe they are wanted, where jobs are important, where they provide a good for the community. If you look at a company that's going to start a new manufacturing plant or a new research facility, where are they going to do that? Are they going to do that in an area where companies are wanting to leave or want to get out because the tax rates are too high? Or are they going to do it in an area where they think it's more competitive? If you're representing shareholder interests, taxes are clearly a cost, and you should do it in an area that makes the most sense. That's why we have to be competitive with other parts of the world. What Durbin has done with this situation is to make our American companies less competitive on a worldwide basis with other companies. It's now attractive for a company in Great Britain to buy a company in the U.S. and control that because of the tax structure. The exact opposite of what we would like to have happen. We'd like to have our U.S. company being able to buy the company in Great Britain, because where companies are headquartered, they tend to have greater community with people in their area. They tend to be more responsive to charities and to local needs than when they're owned and controlled by somebody far away.
Well, Walgreens was the big recent case where you used the bullying word.
Yep.
They're based in Deerfield, which is not far from where all of us grew up, where you live. They have stores all over Springfield, and they're not going to move those stores. So he said it's a great thing they've stayed in America. even though they have to pay more taxes, I guess. You say, should they have gone to, what was it, Switzerland or Sweden? Should they have changed?
No, it's what I said. I will fight harder than anybody to keep businesses here in the United States. But you don't do that by bullying them to stay here in the United States. You do it by making it reasonable, attractive for them. Because if you make it reasonable, attractive, not only will they stay here, but they may buy another company in another country and make them apart and grow through being able to acquire companies. When it's ineffective for them, when it's cheaper for somebody to buy them than for them to buy the other company, over the long period of time, that's what tends to happen.
But isn't what's happening? They're buying a company in another country and then trying to change their location of their headquarters to another country just because it's cheaper?
Yes, that's my point. That's bad.
Okay.
So the way to do that is to have rates in this country that are competitive with the rest of the world, which probably means about a 25% rate.
Right. And if the rate comes down, obviously there's a loss to the federal treasury. But you're
In the short run.
You're saying business
Yes.
would expand to the point that it would.
You have a choice. You can get a smaller piece of a growing pie or a bigger piece of a shrinking pie. In my opinion, Dick Durbin has always wanted to take a bigger and bigger piece, not worrying about the fact that he's going to kill the pie. I believe that the right thing to do for our country, to create jobs, to create more opportunities for people, is to have a competitive piece and grow that pie so that the government can still maintain a significant revenue stream, but do it in a way that is good for the economy, to get our economy growing again at 4 or 5% a year instead of the 1 or 2% that we're growing at now.
Right, I think we're on about our 45 minutes. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you had wanted to bring up? Or do you have anything to say in closing?
I think this whole fact that Mr. Durbin has become so removed from the people that he serves, so out of touch with the people that he serves, and such an egotistical bully is really bad for the state of Illinois. He's been in Washington for 32 years. He may have been a good congressman when he started, but today he doesn't represent the views of the people of Illinois. And I think it's pretty clearly a time for change. And we talked about the IRS bullying. We talked about some of the Walgreens stuff, but there's more. I assume you're familiar with what he did to Alec, or what he attempted to do. And with downstate radio stations, you know, the station in Quincy where he threatened to go to the FCC to have them review their license. I mean, this kind of stuff just goes on and on. He just does this, thinks this is the way it should be done. This is normal stuff. It's not. It should never be done. And if I go to Washington, I will do everything I can to make sure that kind of stuff stops, and that American families are never intimidated by threats of IRS investigations or things of that nature from the federal government.
Has he threatened families, by the way, or are you talking about Karl Rove again?
I'm talking about the
You
whole.
use families. You're talking about something that raised $500 million a year, and it's a political operation.
Look, all of us who fill out income tax returns know that if you get the call from the IRS, they're really not there to help, and we really want to avoid that if we can.